Once upon a time, there was a shoemaker and his wife who lived in a town above their workshop. The shoemaker worked incredibly hard but was still poor. As time continued, the shoemaker only had one piece of leather left and very little money. That evening, the shoemaker cut some shoes from the leather. He left them on the workbench to sew in the morning. He said to his wife sadly, "This is the last piece of leather now, unfortunately. When these shoes are sold, I really don't know what we'll do." The next morning, the shoemaker walked into the workshop ready to make the last pair of shoes, but the shoemaker was shocked. When he got to his workbench, the shoes were already made. The shoemaker scratched his head and looked around bewildered. The shoemaker picked them up and examined them carefully. Each individual stitch was extremely neat. They were made to perfection. He showed them to his wife. She was stunned. They wondered who had sewn the shoes. Later that day, a lady came into the shop. She saw the shoes and was amazed. "Wow, I absolutely love these, sir. I will buy them." She was impressed with the stitchwork and paid the shoemaker double the price. The shoemaker was delighted. He bought more leather. Before he went to bed, he cut out 2 pairs of shoes and placed them onto the workbench. The next morning, the shoemaker walked into the workshop ready to make the shoes. Just like before, the shoes were already made. Later that day, a man came into the shop to buy some shoes. The shoemaker showed him the shoes on the workbench. The man was mesmerized. "I will purchase both pairs, sir. They truly are the finest shoes I have ever seen." He bought both pairs and gave the shoemaker double the price. The shoemaker bought more leather. Before he went to bed, he cut out 4 pairs of shoes and placed them on the bench. The next morning, the shoemaker walked into the workshop ready to make the shoes. Just like before, the shoes were already made. Each night, the shoemaker cut out shoes ready to make in the morning. The next day, they were already made, and because the shoes were made to perfection, many customers came to the shop. The shoemaker was thrilled, and he soon became very rich. Although they were grateful for their riches, they still wondered who it was that was making the immaculate shoes. One evening, not too long before Christmas, the shoemaker said, "We really are blessed. I wonder who's sewing the shoes, though. Let's stay up tonight to see who it is." His wife agreed and she lit a candle, then walked into the workshop and hid. They then watched and waited. Many minutes passed by and nothing happened. Suddenly, as the clock struck 12, the door opened and in burst 2 minuscule elves. They did not realize that the shoemaker and his wife were hiding. The elves dived onto the workbench and began to stitch and sew. Their work was impeccable. They worked exceptionally hard with speed and accuracy. When their mission was completed, they dashed away. The shoemaker and his wife couldn't believe their eyes. Was this even real? The next morning, the shoemaker asked his wife, "How can we ever repay those little elves? They've worked ever so hard to make us happy and successful. I'm so grateful." His wife had an idea. "I know, let's make some new clothes and shoes for them. It's Christmas soon. They always put in the effort for us, so let's do the same for them." As the days continued, the shoemaker and his wife created new clothes and shoes for the elves. They ensured that the clothes were extravagant, just like how the elves had shown extravagance when sewing their shoes. By Christmas Eve, the clothes were completed. They laid the presents on the workbench, then they waited and hid. They were excited to see what the elves would do. When the clock struck 12 and it was Christmas Day, the door opened like before. The elves scurried into the workshop. They leaped onto the workbench, ready to make the shoes. But instead of shoes, they saw presents that were beautifully wrapped. The elves were ecstatic. They opened their presents excitedly. They were most pleased. They admired their gifts and changed into their new attire immediately. They were grateful and content. They skipped and danced with glee, singing, "Thank you both for all that you've done. You've made this Christmas a special one." Then they hopped away happily. Unfortunately, the shoemaker and his wife never saw the elves again, but they remained rich, successful, and exceedingly grateful. They lived happily ever after. The end.